Pisces, there is something in this reading that just would not stop repeating, and I really don't think that's accidental. The cards kept circling back to the same energy in different ways, and by the time we reached the later part of the reading, it became very clear that September is trying to get your attention about something. There's also a moment towards the end of the month that could shift the way you're looking at a situation entirely, but I don't want to give that away just yet. So if you're a fellow Pisces Sun, Moon or Rising sign, let's get into your September 2026 forecast and see what's coming. So September is really about what happens after a major personal shift. You're coming into this month just after a lunar eclipse in Pisces, so something around who you are, what you want, or even the direction you're moving in may already feel a little different. You might even feel like you've outgrown a version of yourself that you were still trying to hold on to. And September starts asking, if you're changing, what else in your life now has to change with you? Relationships are a big focus this month. The Virgo New Moon activates your relationship and partnership energy. So there could be a new chapter beginning with someone, a relationship changing shape, or simply a much clearer understanding of what you actually need from the people closest to you. There's also change happening around home, family, and your sense of stability, with Uranus beginning to turn inward in that part of your chart. You may be considering where you belong, how you want to live, or what actually makes you feel secure. But one of the biggest themes for Pisces this September is self-worth and money. There's a lot of activity around the part of your chart connected to what you earn, what you value, and importantly, what you believe you deserve. That builds toward the Aries Full Moon near the end of the month, where something around money, independence, security, or self-worth could reach a turning point. And by the end of September, the energy starts moving forward again around work, routines, and your everyday life. So overall, Pisces, September feels like a month of asking, now that you're becoming someone different, does the life around you actually match who you're becoming? Let's get into the cards and see what September has in store for you. So coming into September, after that Pisces eclipse, what has already shifted for you that you can't really go back from? Okay, Pisces, this is interesting because for a lot of you, what has shifted already seems to involve a relationship or a really significant connection. You've got the Seven of Cups with the Devil. So that can show me that something has been very difficult to see clearly. There may have been a lot of fantasy around this. So think mixed signals, different possibilities you were holding on to, or even just a tendency to see what you hoped something could become rather than what it actually was. And with the Devil here, there's definitely been an attachment to it. This could be somebody you've found incredibly difficult to let go of, a dynamic you keep getting pulled back into, or even a pattern within relationships that you're finally becoming aware of. But then we have the Two of Cups, so I don't necessarily think the connection itself was fake. There may be very real feelings here, very real chemistry, or a genuine bond between two people. What's changing is the way you see it. The eclipse may have made it much harder for you to keep romanticizing something, ignoring an unhealthy part of it, or convincing yourself that the connection alone is enough. And I think that's the part you can't really go back from now. Once you see the difference between a genuine connection and an attachment to what you wanted that connection to become, it's very hard to unsee it. So I think the shift here is really in how you're seeing this connection now. The feelings may still be real, but you're becoming much more aware of where attachment, fantasy, or unhealthy patterns have been mixed in with it. And that actually leads us really well into the next question, because September isn't just showing you what's changing, it's also showing you where pushing against something may no longer be working. So where is resistance actually redirecting you this month, Pisces? Alright, Page of Pentacles, the Lovers, and Eight of Cups. I actually think the resistance here is around accepting that something may need to change, even when there are still very real feelings involved. The Lovers coming straight after the Two of Cups is significant because we are still clearly dealing with connection, relationships, and choice, Pisces. But now we have the Eight of Cups beside it, which tells me that part of September may be about recognizing where you can't keep emotionally investing in something in exactly the same way you have been. And I don't necessarily mean that everybody watching this is walking away from a person. For some of you, you absolutely could be, don't get me wrong. But for others, you may be walking away from an old version of the relationship, an expectation you had for it, or even a pattern that keeps repeating within it. Because the Page of Pentacles is showing me where you're actually being redirected. There's something new, grounded, and tangible trying to open for you. It might feel smaller or less dramatic than whatever you've been emotionally consumed by, but it has the potential to actually grow into something stable. So September may be asking you to stop pouring all of your energy into what you're struggling to make work and start noticing what is quietly trying to build itself in front of you. And that leads perfectly into our next question, because we talked about that Virgo New Moon bringing this rebuilding energy into September. So Pisces, what are you being given the opportunity to rebuild this month? Pisces, 10 of Pentacles, the Magician, and Judgment. This is big, but what you're being given the opportunity to rebuild this month is your long-term security and the future you're actually creating for yourself. The 10 of Pentacles is the life that lasts. Think stability, home, family, finances, commitment, the things you want to build that still matter years from now. And after everything we've already seen around relationships and attachment, I feel like September is asking you to become much more intentional about what you actually want your life to be built on. Because then we have the Magician. This is you realizing that you have far more power over what happens next than you may have thought. Instead of waiting for somebody else to choose you, change, give you security, or make something happen, there's this energy of what can I create from here? And Judgment makes this feel like a genuine wake-up call. I just saw 111 on the camera, so 100% confirmation. Something has become very clear to you. And once you've had that realization, you can't really go back to living the same way. For some of you, this could absolutely involve family, home, money, or a long-term relationship. But ultimately, it feels like you're being called to build a life that actually reflects the person you're becoming. And interestingly, our next question is actually about that kind of change in perspective. With Uranus turning retrograde this month, there may be something you're suddenly looking at completely differently. So Pisces, what are you beginning to see differently this September? All right, Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Wands, and Page of Pentacles. First of all, double Queen energy. I love it. I think what you're beginning to see differently this month is your own value and what you're actually capable of building for yourself. The Queen of Pentacles knows what she brings to the table. She's grounded, capable, secure in herself. She doesn't need to chase or prove that she deserves something. And then we have the Queen of Wands. which adds confidence, magnetism, and this much stronger sense of I know who I am and I know what I have to offer. So having these two queens together feels really powerful, Pisces. It's like you're stepping into this combination of knowing your worth and having the confidence to actually act like you know it. After everything we've already seen around attachment, confusion, and relationships, I think September is changing the way you see yourself within those dynamics. You may be realizing that you don't need to keep convincing somebody of your worth, waiting for someone else to validate you, or pouring all of your energy into something just because you're emotionally attached to it. And then the Page of Pentacles feels like the beginning of putting that realization into practice. This is very much beginner energy. So think learning something new, making a practical plan, investing in yourself, or taking the first small steps towards creating more stability. So this isn't necessarily everything changes overnight. It's more you're starting to behave like someone who knows their worth. And those small decisions could become something much bigger over time. Which once again leads us perfectly into the next question, because September is putting a lot of emphasis on your relationships, your money, and your self-worth. So Pisces, what truth about love, money, or your own self-worth is beginning to surface for you this September? All right, so 2 of Cups, Page of Swords, and 6 of Swords. And there's that 2 of Cups again. So I really don't think we're imagining the relationship theme running through this reading. For a lot of you, there's a particular connection sitting underneath a lot of what September is bringing up, but the truth that's surfacing feels different now. So the 2 of Cups says there's a genuine bond here. There can be mutual feelings, attraction, emotional recognition, that sense that something is there between two people. But the Page of Swords tells me you're looking at it much more closely now. You're questioning things, you're observing someone's behavior, you're paying attention to what is actually being communicated rather than just what you hope they mean. So for some of you, there could also be a conversation or information coming through that helps you understand this connection differently. And then we have the 6 of Swords. So the truth may be that even when a connection is real, the way you've been experiencing it cannot continue exactly as it has been. Something needs to move into calmer territory, Pisces. For some of you, that could mean moving on from a connection altogether. But for others, I think it's much more about leaving behind the confusion, the overthinking, watching, waiting, or uncertainty that has surrounded it. And considering we started this reading with the 7 of Cups and the Devil, that's actually a pretty significant progression. We're going from confusion and attachment into clarity and movement. The relationship might still matter. The feelings might still exist, but you're starting to understand that your peace has to matter as well. Now we've had this connection show up several times already, so I want to dig underneath it a little bit. So what attachment or dynamic can no longer stay hidden from you this September? 3 of Cups, 8 of Swords, and Queen of Cups. I actually feel like the dynamic being exposed here is how much your emotional attachment to something may have been keeping you mentally stuck. So the 3 of Cups can absolutely be friendship, your social circle, reconciliation, or wanting to come back together with somebody. And yes, for some of you, it can indicate another person being involved somewhere in the situation. But I wouldn't jump straight to third-party energy for everyone watching. What really stands out to me is the 3 of Cups going into the 8 of Swords here. So there may have been this hope of reconnecting, keeping something friendly, waiting to see what happens, or staying emotionally available to a situation that has actually kept you in this constant state of thinking, analyzing, and wondering what everything means. And then we move on to the Queen of Cups, which honestly feels like you, Pisces. You feel deeply. You can understand somebody else's perspective. You can see the good in people. And sometimes you can hold emotional space for someone for a very long time. That's honestly a beautiful quality, Pisces. But September may be showing you where that compassion has crossed over into keeping yourself emotionally tied to something that isn't even giving you peace. And I think that's an important distinction. You don't have to stop caring about somebody in order to stop allowing the situation to consume your thoughts. You don't have to become cold. You just might need to stop making your emotional availability endless. Burp confirmation, sorry. And there's something else interesting here, because the next part of September brings Chiron back into your area of your chart connected to self-worth and what you believe you deserve. So let's look underneath all of this. What old wound are you being given the opportunity to respond to differently this September? Okay, so the Magician, 5 of Pentacles, 8 of Pentacles, and the Sun. This feels like a wound around not feeling chosen, supported, secure, or good enough. So the 5 of Pentacles can be that feeling of being left out in the cold. So think rejection, abandonment, financial insecurity, or even just that underlying belief of maybe I don't have enough, maybe I'm not enough. But look at what's surrounding it. You have the Magician before it, which is almost like September is asking you to stop seeing yourself as powerless in the face of that wound. The Magician says you have resources, you have ability, you have choices. You're not stuck waiting for somebody else to come along and make you feel worthy or safe. And then the 8 of Pentacles says the way you respond differently now is by actually investing in yourself. You build the skill, do the work, you create the stability, you keep showing up for yourself. And I really love that we finish on the Sun, because that feels like the outcome of doing that work. It's confidence, clarity, feeling more like yourself again, and actually allowing yourself to be seen. So if the old wound was, I'm not enough, September may be teaching you to respond with, then I'm going to stop waiting for someone else to prove my worth to me and start building a life that proves it to myself. And that Sun after the 5 of Pentacles is such a beautiful shift, Pisces. We're moving from scarcity into visibility, warmth, and confidence. Now, towards the end of September, we have that Aries Full Moon activating your money, security, and self-worth axis. So I want to see what reaches a turning point there. Pisces, what comes to a head for you around the Aries Full Moon? Okay, Queen of Swords, King of Cups, and 7 of Swords. This feels like a moment of clarity around something you may have been trying to emotionally rationalize for a while. So, the Queen of Swords is very clear-eyed. She's not cold, but she does want the truth. She's looking at what someone is actually doing, what's actually being said, and whether the situation makes sense when you remove the emotion from it. Then we have the King of Cups. So there are definitely feelings here. This could represent another person who has genuine emotions but doesn't necessarily express everything openly. Or it could be you learning how to hold your emotions without letting them completely dictate your decisions. And then the 7 of Swords. So something about this situation may not have been fully transparent. Now, that doesn't automatically mean someone is lying or cheating. It can be avoidance, withholding, someone not saying exactly what they feel, or even you knowing deep down that something isn't right, but trying not to confront it yet. So around this Aries full moon, I think that becomes much harder to ignore, especially because this full moon is activating your self-worth and security. So the turning point may be you deciding, I can have feelings for someone and still require honesty. Or I can understand why somebody behaves the way they do without accepting behavior that doesn't work for me. And I actually really like the Queen of Swords with the King of Cups because it feels like head and heart finally coming into balance. You're not shutting your feelings off. You're just not letting your feelings convince you to overlook what your intuition and your logic are already showing you. And once that clarity arrives, we get a much more fiery energy towards the end of the month as Mars moves into Leo. So, my fellow Pisces, where is September asking you to stop holding yourself back and be a little bit bolder? All right, with the Hierophant, King of Pentacles, and Ace of Swords, it's actually about getting really clear on what you want and being willing to stand by it. The Hierophant is about your values, your standards, commitment, and the things you're willing to build your life around. For some of you, this could absolutely relate to a relationship, especially considering how strongly relationships have run through this entire reading. And you may be getting much clearer about what kind of commitment you actually want. But it can also be career, education, spirituality, or simply deciding, this is the path I want to take, and I'm going to take it seriously. Then we have the King of Pentacles. And I love this because there's such a strong theme throughout your reading of moving towards something more stable, grounded, and secure. You've had so much Pentacles energy. So perhaps being bold this month actually means choosing stability over intensity, choosing what has long-term potential, choosing the person, job, opportunity, or direction that can actually give you something solid rather than constantly keeping you guessing. And then we finish with the Ace of Swords. That's clarity. So think a decision, a truth, a conversation, a moment where suddenly you know exactly what you need to do. And after starting this reading with the Seven of Cups and the Devil, I really love that we end here. You started with confusion, attachment, and not necessarily being able to see something clearly. And we're finishing with the Ace of Swords, complete clarity. So by the end of September, Pisces, you may be much more certain about what you want, what you're willing to commit to, and what you're no longer willing to compromise on. And I think that's where your boldness comes from, not from forcing anything, just from finally being able to say, I know what I want now. So we've looked at everything September is bringing up for you. Now I want to finish your reading with your oracle message. I can't believe we're already at the end. So what does Pisces most need to know, remember, or carry with them through September? So your oracle card is growth, plants. And the message here is magic is in the everyday. You can make something from nothing. Blossom, it's time. From small things, big things grow. And I actually love this after everything we've just seen because your reading hasn't really been about one enormous moment coming in and changing your entire life overnight. It's been about you changing the way you see yourself, making different choices, and slowly building something better from there. We had that Page of Pentacles earlier, those first practical steps. We had the Eight of Pentacles, putting that work in. We had the Magician twice, reminding you that you have far more power to create change than you might realize. And now your oracle is literally saying, start with what you have. You don't need everything figured out. You don't need the perfect circumstances. And you don't need somebody else to give you permission. Plant the seed. Take the small step. Make the decision. Have that conversation. Apply for the thing. Change the routine. Whatever this looks like for you. Because something that feels very small in September could actually become a much bigger part of your life over time. And I think Blossom, its time, is especially beautiful after that Five of Pentacles into the Sun earlier. There's this feeling of coming out of a period where you may have felt rejected, uncertain, overlooked, or simply disconnected from your own power, and beginning to come back to life again. So Pisces, your message for September is really simple. Don't underestimate the small changes you're making now. From small things, big things grow, and you're entering a season of growth. And I forgot to read you your full moon message, which is I accept that here now is exactly where I am, and that is a place of profound learning, which I think ties so well into the reading as well. So if this reading resonated with you, Pisces, comment "I'm ready to grow" down below. Let's claim that growth energy together. And if you enjoyed this reading, I would love to invite you to subscribe and join our beautiful soul collective here. We're creating such a gorgeous little community, and I would absolutely love to have you as part of it as well. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, Pisces. I'm sending you so much love for the month ahead, and I will see you in the next reading.